Hi, my name is James Speer. I'm a systems consultant at Valuize, and welcome back to Valuize Your Gainsight Experience, a video series where we take a deep dive into Gainsight's features and functionalities to help you successfully adopt, implement, and maximize your Gainsight investment. Today's video is part 2 of a 3-part series where we will ultimately be creating automated CTAs with object linking and a lookup for reporting. Automated CTAs will free up your CSM's time to work on value driving activities, and the linked objects and lookups associated to the CTA will give valuable insights through reporting. We will be covering the setup of a rule to automatically generate a set of CTAs in today's video. Welcome to our second video where we will be covering the setup of an automated CTA created through a rule. We have the rule right here, Professional Services Lifecycle, and I've got the tabs open, so we're going to take a look at the setup as well as the actions. And I'm going to go through the actions really quick before we take a look at our setup, but we have two different stages that we're pulling from. Fetch from Professional Services, which is going to use really basic data that we're pulling directly from our custom object, as well as this setup that I've called Get First Day of Next Month. And this is where the really cool actions are going to come from. And we'll take a look at the transformation necessary to get to this step. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the basic information that we're going to be pulling in. So we're creating a CTA onto the company. So we need our company GSID. We've named it Professional Services Onboarding. You can also add in dynamic fields if you'd like to. However, I haven't, and that is specifically for reporting purposes. We want all of the CTAs to have the same name so that when we generate a report later, they can be grouped together. We are including the name of our CTA in identifiers, and we have selected our lifecycle type where we first set up that linked object as well as our additional group. We have our CSM lookup that we're bringing in, and so let's take a look real quick. So we have our linked object, which you can select from here because we've already linked this in the call to action object. And we're using the GSID. This is brought in through the setup. And we have our additional fields here. So this is that group that is not the default group. And we see our professional services record field that we generated on the call to action object. And this is, again, that professional services GSID. We are bringing this in from the setup step. In the comments, I have added a dynamic field. So it's going to say whatever the name of the company is, plus some comment that's going to be generated with the CTA itself. We can see that we're using the professional services start date as our criteria. So we're looking for a start date that's within 3 days of when our rule has been run. And the reason we have this greater than or equal to subtract 3 days from rule date is so that if we're not running our rules over the weekend and a new engagement gets created Friday night after the rule has already been run, when we run it again on Monday, we capture that engagement and create a CTA for it. So let's take a look at our setup. Okay, so we're going to take a look at our data fetch, which we've called fetch from professional services. Go ahead and click in here. And we have our custom object, professional services, where we are pulling our fields from. So we are taking the name field, which for our custom object is going to be what we are titling our engagement. The services end date and start date, our CSM lookup field. We have our company lookup field. This is the GSID for the record in the custom object. And we are renaming that Professional Services GSID, which we saw in the action step we are using to link to the object and also create our lookup field on the call to action. We're bringing in our annual count number, as well as the company name. And this is used mostly for this piece right here, just so that we can include that company name in the actual action. For our filters, we are going to be looking for active engagements. So we have our Services end date is greater than or equal to the rule date, so whatever date that we're running this rule, and the start date is before. I've included 2 filters here because I wanted to specifically work with these 2 engagements. When you're running this on your own, this is great for testing. However, you would want to remove these 2 filters so that you're capturing all of your engagements. Go ahead and save that real quick. And so now let's take a look at our first transformation. So we have all of the fields that we pulled in, and we are going to grab rule date, which is going to come out of the date formulas from the formula field here. Bringing this in is going to give us today's date. If we run the rule for today, if we're to run the rule for tomorrow, it would give us tomorrow's date, etc. We have another formula, which I've titled last day of month. So we are going to take the last day of current month. If we were to run this today, this would give us February 28th, since it is not a leap year this year. We are getting last day of quarter, which is the same. This is going to give us March 31st, I believe. We're taking in the annual count. We're going to do a number formula. Actually, I believe it's a numeric expression. So this is taking our annual count number field, and we are adding 1 to it. And if we take a look at our data management, we can see the annual count is set to 0 for all of our engagements. This will create a field that is counted as 1. We are also taking our annual count, and we are, with a numeric expression, multiplying it by 365. Since the annual count is 0 for all of our engagements, this is going to return an answer of 0. However, if our annual count was set to 1, we would get 365 here. And for our final transformation, we have all of the fields that we generated in that last transformation. And we are also doing a couple of other transformations. We are going to add subtract date. So we're going to take that last day of month function that we produced in our last transformation. We are adding 1 day to it, and that will give us the first day of the next month. So in this instance, if the rule was run today, the last day of the month would be the 28th. We add 1 day, so this function is going to give us March 1st. And we are also going to create the service start anniversary. So that's going to take our professional services start date, and we are going to add the annual count year modification. So in that previous step, for most of our engagements, that's going to add 0. So this is going to give us the same date as our services start. However, if we were to have run this rule next year, when that annual count has been increased by 1, this would give us 1 year from the start date. And that's where some of the fun can start to happen. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actions, which are leveraging these fields we've created. In our first 2, we are simply using our start date and end date. So for our renewal, we're looking for a renewal that's going to be 120 days away from the end of the engagement. So we take the professional services end date, and we want that to be equal to the rule date plus end days. So we're going to add 120 days to when this rule was run. And that way we are getting the CTA 120 days before the end of that service. And that way our CSM knows that it's time to start working on renewals. We've added a little playbook for them to check out for that. Okay, so now for the fun stuff. Okay, so we're going to take a look at our next setup that we are creating actions off of, which is the get first day of next month transformation, which was the last step here in our group, get first day of next month. And we're going to take a look at the annual review, which we want to have happen every single year, right around the anniversary of the start of that engagement. So most of this is going to be set up the same as our previous step. The lifecycle type is what we're using. We have our linked object set up, professional services, with the GSID that we pulled through the rule, as well as our group is linked, professional services. You can see that the name is included in identifiers. We have our annual review playbook, just a little cheeky comment for ourselves, and this is where the powerful piece starts. We have the service start anniversary, which was the date field that we generated that is based off of the professional services start date and the annual count modifier. So in this instance, for any of our engagements that are still in their first year, the service start anniversary is going to be equal to the professional services start. So whatever day we run this rule for, if 330 days ago or 11 months ago, the professional services started, we would get a CTA generated. And next year, when our annual count has gone up by 1, the services start anniversary will essentially be 1 year in the future, which means that we only need to have this criteria set up for one single instance, as the service start anniversary will continue to count forward every year that this engagement is valid for. Take a look at our QBR. And we have similar setup here, name of our CTA, life cycle, playbook that we're running it off of, CSM lookup field. We have our linked object and our grouped field on the call to action object. And now we have this same setup here where the service start anniversary is what we're using. And we're taking a look when the rule is 90 days away from that service start, 180 days from the service start, and 270, which gives us a quarterly look at the engagement. And again, because of that annual count and the modifier being added to our professional services start, every year that this engagement is active, we're going to be generating a quarterly business review 90 days from that professional services start. So 90 days, 180, 270. And then as this progresses a full year, again, 90, 180, and 270 for that next year, we will get these QBR CTAs created. And we have one last one for calls to action to look at. This isn't necessarily as useful for a life cycle. It is just kind of fun. So this is if you want to send monthly tasks to your CSMs, whatever those may be. We've put this on the professional services type for our call to action. And we're using our last day of the month, which we generated as the method for criteria. So for this month, this would be active on the 25th of February because we're adding end days to the rule date. So if we run this on the 25th, we would add 3 days. That would be the 28th, which would give us the last day of the month. So the CTA would be generated. And this essentially allows you to create a set of tasks that you'd like your CSMs to complete each month with that customer. The other piece that we've added is this detail here. So that first day of next month field that we generated, which would say March 1st, 2023, for instance, for this month, this will keep all of our monthly professional services grouped together so that when we're doing some reporting, we're able to look at each month that we want to take a look at. Okay, and the last little piece here is us loading to the Gainsight object. So we're loading our annual count to the custom object. And we're running this on the same date that we'd run the annual review, so 330 days from the services start. Let me give this just a moment to load for us. And this is a pretty simple piece. We are essentially loading the annual count increase to our custom object. So we have our annual count modifier. So that was the annual count plus 1. And we are upserting that into the annual count field. So essentially 1 day a year, this annual count increases by 1. So for this year, if it runs on the correct date, the annual count will go from 0 to 1. And that will set up your CTAs to run for the following year without you having to do anything other than running this rule. And what we are looking for as far as our identifiers is our company GSID, and then also the professional service, and I've called it professional services ID name, but it's the name field on our custom object. We're using these two as our identifiers. As we might expect, a single company to have multiple engagements with the same company. And this way, we're only making changes to a relevant engagement. Okay. And we can take a look real quick at one more piece on the data management. This annual count can also be created directly with a function put into the custom object. And the reason I haven't done that here is sort of just in case if the rule doesn't run on the proper day, we don't want to have this count change without our annual review being generated as well. So, for instance, if we were only running rules Monday through Friday and the data changes over the weekend, we might miss that annual review. So, by only upserting that annual count, we're preventing ourselves from missing any CTA creation. And there's many ways that you could be generating this, but that's the way we've chosen to do it for this session. Okay, and that's going to be everything for the second video today. In our third video, we'll go ahead and cover the reporting and take a look at the CTAs we've created with this rule. Gainsight's call to action feature is highly valuable if used thoughtfully in conjunction with linked objects and lookups. Calls to action can be leveraged by your CSMs to work on value-driving activities and by your admins to build informative, actionable reports. If you have any questions about this feature or want to learn more, check out the resources section of the Valuize website or contact our team of customer lifecycle and Gainsight experts. Keep an eye out for our next video where we'll be sharing an in-depth look into the product of our setup along with some of the powerful reporting capabilities available to us.